In this video, we will make a chart showing what happens to the sales dollars that come into the income statement. Let's draft it on paper first. On the x-axis, we'll have years, and on the y-axis, we'll have dollars in millions. First thing we'll do is make a regular line chart that shows sales. And then we'll make a combo chart and start adding different types of charts. We'll use stacked area charts to show cost of goods sold and all the other items. Until what we have left is retained earnings. At least hopefully we have some retained earnings left. Let's jump into Excel and get ready to build our chart. First, I'm going to hide some of these rows up here. Could delete them, but I want to keep the formulas the same in case you want to refer to them. And let's just insert a blank chart. Typically we might have some data in mind to work with, but this time we're just going to insert a blank chart of the same type that I showed you for sales. There are two good ways to get data into a chart. One is to right-click, select data, add a series, find those series values, give the series a name, and give the chart some x-axis labels. I'll show you the other good way to add data in a moment. Notice that the default name of our chart is the same name as the first series. I'm going to turn on the legend so we can see the name of that series. And I'm going to rename the chart Breakdown of Sales. So we've done the step one where we got the sales across the top. What we'd like to do now is start adding stacked area charts to this to see what portion of sales goes to cost of goods sold, what portion goes to overhead, and so forth. I can't put negative numbers on charts, so I'm going to come out to the right and put some positive numbers out there. First, I'll copy the headers so I know where I'm going with this. And for cost of goods sold, I'm going to say equal negative C29. I can plot a positive 315. I'm just going to copy that down to grab SG&A, DD&A, interest expense, taxes, dividends. And as we said in the other part, hopefully we have some retained earnings left over. We don't want to put a negative sign in front of them, so we'll just do it that way. Now if I select all this, hopefully it adds up to 525, I see in the status bar, which is the same as our sales. So we're off on a good start here. If we Control R, we can copy that across. Now we have data that we can add into the chart. As I said, there were two good ways to add data. One is to right-click, select data, and work through this dialog box. If you don't want to go through the dialog box, you can always select the data, copy it, click one time on the chart, and I like to choose a white space out here where I'm not going to get a part of the chart, which might mess me up. Click one time on the chart, do an Alt HVS, which takes you to Home, paste Special, and hopefully it recognizes that you have a chart. If you got this Paste Special dialog box that looks like this, then Excel recognized that you have a chart and it's going to help you paste that data on there. If not, you need to back up and do something different. This dialog box asks us 4 questions, and Excel usually does a pretty good job of guessing. It says, I see that you're copying cells to this chart. Are those supposed to be new points? In other words, are we extending that blue line further out, or is this a new series? Perhaps another line above or below it of different color. Obviously we want a new series, and I can't remember ever adding new points to a series, but you have that option. The other thing it asks is, let's say we had selected multiple rows and columns of data over here. It needs to know, is your series data in rows or in columns? In this case, it's in rows, so Excel is 2 for 2. And then it looks at the first cell that we copied, and if it saw some text here, it would probably guess that that was the name of the new series. But since we didn't include cost of goods sold when we copied this data, it left that one blank. Excel's 3 for 3. Category X labels could be in the first row. If we had selected multiple rows and columns, we'd need to let it know. It's a pretty easy guess if we only selected one row that it was not our X labels. But Excel's 4 for 4 on that, so we can leave everything as is, don't have to fix anything, hit OK, and we see our new series pop up. Now, since we didn't select anything for a label, two good ways to add a name. One would be right-click, select data, edit the series, and just give it a name. And we could type in a name or refer to a cell. The other good way to do that, and here's a test item to pay attention to, is if we click on that series and look up in the formula bar, we actually see the series function up here. The only time you'll ever see that in Excel is on a chart. You would never type series into a cell over here as a formula, but Excel automatically provides series, and it always has 4 things. So test question here, what are the 4 arguments that go into series? And they are, the very first one is the name. I'm going to go ahead and update the name by clicking on this cell. Notice that now the name is coming from B29, at least after I hit enter it will. And the chart data, the X data, is coming from C26 through K26. The Y data is coming from N29 through V29. And the series order is 2. So let me hit enter and notice that it updated the series name. If I wanted to change that series order to 1, watch what happens to the order of these 2 legend entries. It puts cost of goods sold on top of sales. Now obviously it doesn't change the numbers over here. The numbers are still 525 and 315, but it changes the order of those. The order is important if we want our legend to line up with the way the data falls on the graph sometimes. This graph is much less readable right now when these are not out of order than it is right now when the top line on the chart lines up with the top line in the legend. That's even more important with a stacked area chart. So let's do this again for SG&A, but this time let's go ahead and copy this cell or click this cell. I'm going to click Control and click again with the mouse over here. Do a Control Shift right, Control C to copy. And now I can paste this discontiguous range. I've got the series name over here in column B and the data beginning in column N. It's on my clipboard because I hit Control C and I have these dashed lines zooming around it. So if I click on the chart and do the HVS, get this dialog box that lets me know I'm in the right place. It's another new series in rows. This time I do have my series name in the first column, and Excel was wise enough to figure that out. And I still don't have any X labels in the first row. So this added our SG&A. Let's repeat this process, but this time I'm going to select the discontiguous ranges using the keyboard. So Shift F8, move my cursor over, select, Control C to copy. Alt HVS, and it actually guessed all those correctly as well. So I'm going to continue to get the rest of our lines on here. And notice I ran out of space on the legend. I'm going to make this chart larger just to make sure we got everything. And I do see income taxes, dividends, and retained earnings. When the chart's smaller, we can't see those. We've got some pretty long labels in the legend. So let's use this series trick to fix that. Right now I feel like I'm following modeling rule number 1 pretty well because I'm not using a value when a reference would work. But sometimes we need to do so. So this time I'm going to change that to sales. I'm working up here and it's a reference, I don't need the quotes, but if it's text, I do need the quotes. So that didn't change the sales, but let's see if we can change the cost of goods sold. And that makes for a shorter legend by changing that up here. Of course, we could have right-clicked and gone to select data and done the same thing. I'm going to cycle through the rest of these series using the Control up-down keys until I get them all shorter legends. And now I'm showing all the data on the chart, but remember it's just a regular line chart that I drew. So it does show the sales at 525, the cost of goods sold at 315. Probably the next largest one is DD&A at 62, but that's not at all the picture I drew on the paper. So what I want to do is change this chart type by right-clicking and changing the chart type. And I need a combo chart. If I made them all stacked chart like this, look what happens. It just adds them all together, including my sales. So sales is already 525, and then adds all the pieces, which are another 525, to get me to 1050. Not what we want to do. So we'll right click, change chart type, and make it a combo so we can have different types of charts on the same one. I'm going to make most of them stacked area. Actually, sales is the one I don't want to be stacked area. I want it to be that regular chart on top. And see if when I stack the other pieces, it adds up to sales. And it looks like it does. If I had any taste in color, I might want to go back here and change some of these, but I would probably do more harm than good. So I'm going to leave that like it is. And so now we have the stacked area chart showing the breakdown of sales. Make this a bit smaller. A couple of tricks to make this fit on less space. One is to get rid of that decimal place. So I'll highlight on that column, go to home. It's not going to let me change it up here. So what I can do is right click, format the axis, go down here to number. And the reason it wouldn't let me change it is I'm linked to the source. So I could change it by going into the source, but I sure don't want to do that. So I'm going to unlink it and then tell it I don't want any decimal places. And so that might free up a tiny bit of room. The other thing would be to come here and see if I can change the font size. And it will let me change the font size. Another trick might be to use 2-digit year labels if we were trying to put a lot of information on this chart. But right now I think this is enough. The main thing I wanted to investigate with this chart is what happens when I issue debt or issue equity. When I issue debt, the thing that jumps out at me is sales didn't change, because in our model, we are not doing anything with that cash that we generate from the debt to change our sales. Now we probably should. If we wanted to generate some cash, there should be a reason to do it, and we should tie that to sales as well. But in our simple model, there's not. We're just issuing debt. And what we see on the chart is the interest jumped up. It didn't do it suddenly in 1 year, because remember, our interest is calculated on the average of last year and this year's debt balance. And the interest jumped up at the expense, no pun intended, to the detriment of retained earnings. And so what happens when we issue equity? When we issue equity, retained earnings actually got a little bit larger. And what we see changing the most is actually our net interest expense. So what we've done here is issued equity that brought some cash in the door to generate more interest income and therefore reduce our net interest expense, and really had no other effect on the income statement. Again, that may not be realistic, because the reason we might want to issue equity is to increase our sales or buy some assets that would change our DD&A. But with this simple model, we can see what's happening when we change. I want to mention that I had a computer crash and I noticed that I'd lost my dollars per share. That's why I added that. And also, let's do a couple of things to make this a little bit more interesting. We can remove the fill on the chart background. And we can even remove the outline on the chart background. Makes it nice and transparent. And again, I'm not the person to go to for color selection or things like that, but you may like the style of this on your dashboard. In the next video, we'll make some stacked bar charts to look at what's happening on the balance sheet.